Hello and welcome to the Beechgrove Garden, but patently we've left it behind today. We're on our summer hauls. We've moved up to the Moray Coast, the town of Nairn, and getting our share of the ozone. It's a wonderful spot. Right behind me here is the Moray Firth and the Sutters of Cromarty, the Black Isle, and right away in the far distance there, the hills of Sutherland. Back in the 19th century, this town was a bit of a spa town, not in your sort of bath-type spa. No, it was the sea. The temperature was just a little warmer here than elsewhere.
And I think what's rather interesting is even though we are 90 miles northwest of Beechgrove, it's one of the sunniest places in Scotland and used to be called the Brighton of the North.
That's incredible, isn't it? And also, as well as being... yeah, there you go, you see, just when you need it. As well as being the sunniest, it's also apparently one of the driest areas in Scotland. I don't want to tempt fate, given the colour of the clouds in that direction.
That's true.
But it is dry here, which is even more remarkable when you consider the latitude. Because if you head due west, Hudson Bay, due east, Moscow.
And of course, the question for us is what actually grows here.
You know, if you want to know anything about the local growing conditions, there's no better place to start than an allotment. And here there's a whole host of Mediterranean herbs, raspberries, strawberries, courgettes, artichokes, apples, cherries, you name it, it's all plentiful. And shouldn't come really as a surprise because this site, Mill Road Allotments, was many years ago the local pasture for the draft horses that were tethered here when they weren't working after bringing, well, the harbour produce from that end of town to the railway line at this end of town. Today, where you can grow a whole host of produce on what is reputed to be 3 metres deep of fertile alluvial soil. Perfect for the small-scale gardener.
Now then, Chris was showing there's a small-scale production of vegetables in this part of the world. But Steve, out here in the field, this is part of the speciality of the Moray Coast, isn't it? Growing commercial crops. The reason being?
Morayshire got a perfect climate for root vegetables, combined with very light, free-draining soils, as we can see today, and the combination of the two give us ideal growing conditions for this crop.
So yes, indeed, I mean, not just carrots, but potatoes and beetroot are also...
That's right.
Wonderful depth of soil and drainage too. I mean, we've had an enormous amount of rain over the last 24 hours, and yet that soil is hardly sticking to the boots.
The free draining characteristics of the soil, they're so important to root veg growers. Not only are we looking for a good growing climate, we also store the carrots on the land right throughout the winter.
Yes.
And it's essential that we are able to select land that's not going to waterlog.
And it's still going to be able to be harvested during these periods. Now, tell me about the varieties. I mean, they all look the same here, but we've got red ones and yellow ones and so on. Is that a new fad that you're responding to?
Colours have been around for many years, but in the high street we haven't seen them very often until recently, and there's definitely an appetite out there for more exciting colours.
Yes. I've kept the $64,000 question to the last. How do you deal with carrot fly?
There's a couple of cultural things that we do commercially. Firstly, we try and delay the sowing of the crop so that we actually miss the first cycle of egg laying.
Which is when in this part of the world?
It would be early May.
Yeah.
So we'll delay the drilling until after that first phase. Subsequent to that, we apply garlic granules.
Really?
And the smell of the garlic is enough to prevent the egg laying.
Well, you couldn't get a better endorsement than that, folks. How often do you have to put it on?
Ideally every 10-14 days, right throughout the growing season.
So then there's a break, because then we get the second generation August time, perhaps,
Around
in this
about
part
then,
of the world. Do you start the treatment again then?
Yes, we do, and continue right into the autumn.
Jim, Chris and I are in and around Nairn, finding out what grows and possibly what doesn't here on the Moray Coast. We've been invited by the Nairn and District Gardening Club to host a question session later, and hopefully between us we might even have some answers.
That's not going to... But I just thought I'd ask.
I'm hoping Jim's going to fill in for a bit longer so that I can rack my brain.
To find out a little more about the growing conditions in Nairn, Jim is visiting a small garden in the centre of Nairn. It's a plant-packed, tiny seaside-themed garden owned by Donald Cheen.
Hello there, Donald. Hello. I can tell already that we're going to have an interesting visit. Lead on,
yes.
Up, as they say. Right, then what have we got here, Donald? Well, heavens above. What a display, eh? And of course, the thing that takes the eye straight away is that birch tree. Oh, that's incredible. And although this tree predominates, you know, you've got so much colour, so much of everything in the garden.
Yeah.
How old is the tree?
It's about 16 years now.
Do you ever have to wash the bark? Does it get green? Some people
Naturally keeps itself clean by the bark peels off.
Despite the fact that it's a mature tree, it doesn't cast a lot of shade, and you've got this wonderful feel, a kind of seaside feel, as one would expect. But if we start round this corner here, I'm interested in this Weigela, the golden one here. Now that's able to grow twice the size. What do you do?
Well, we just take out the point.
Let me see how much you're taking out. Well, aye, right, aye, and it doesn't affect the flowering.
Oh no.
No.
You can see.
Well, you wouldn't want to.
Otherwise, it would be way out here, you know.
Exactly. And talking seaside, we've got this lovely barrow converted into a boat.
Padded boat.
Aye, good. And a lighthouse.
Yes. Solar powered.
It's a wee bit. Oh, I was going to say it's a wee bit garish, but tell me about solar power.
It comes on as soon as it gets dark, and it works. It carries on all night long, and then it switches itself off when the light's in the morning.
So why have you got it there?
It has the dual purpose of keeping out the cats from the garden, you know, digs up the borders.
It doesn't need any other purpose. I'm going to sign up for one of these.
Oh, yes.
Are they expensive?
No, they're just about £10.
Right then, Donald, where are you leading me now? What's the next surprise?
This is the fruit section.
The fruit section. It's a... Oh, in the name of patience. What have we got here? Red currant or white currant?
White currant, yeah.
Wow.
Just train up the side of the shed.
What? And facing north?
Facing north, yeah.
Eh? That's a fantastic lesson to learn, how to use a bit of space. There they go. Up there, they're absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
You get some crop off that. Well, that's
Well,
three.
they are.
It's been a short visit, dear boy, but that's three cracking tips. How to keep a shrub smallish, how to keep the cats out of the garden, and this, use of space. Thanks, Donald. That's been brilliant.
This is the Community and Arts Centre where we're hosting our Q&A session, and we've been invited by the Nairn and District Gardening Club, and they've invited many of their gardening friends, so I think it's going to be really interesting to see what challenging gardening questions they have for us. The MC is our friend and broadcaster Mark Stephen, and I think I better go and join them and stay out of the rain.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome here to Nairn. We're absolutely delighted to be here, not least of which because, as we know, Nairn has its own microclimate. It actually only rains once a year in Nairn. Sadly, that day is today, and it's all arriving at once. Ladies and gentlemen, you've come here with your gardening questions. Can I ask you to welcome to the stage Jim McCall, Miss Carol Baxter, ladies and gentlemen, your Beechgrove gardening question team. Right, we've asked for questions already. You take that microphone and I'll ask you a question. Can you remember it?
I have red cabbages planted for the first time in my allotment. They have beautiful, beautiful long leaves on them, but there's not one sign of a nice, neat, compact heart.
Carol has got heartless red cabbages, Jim.
Patience is what you need, madam. Patience. It will arrive in due time. The red cabbage is probably autumn to winter meant to be, and it needs a long growing season before it starts to heart up. Just have patience.
It also needs sunlight as well, which I know may sound a little bit far-fetched today, but you do find that if the plants are overshadowed by perhaps over-enthusiastic planting of other crops close by, that they will struggle to form a heart. So make sure you give them sufficient space.
And the other thing that I would add is maybe plenty of fertiliser, because they're a very leafy crop. And you have beautiful, very sort of sandy soil, and because we are getting a bit of rain as well, a lot of the fertiliser actually just goes through the soil. So, you know, something high in nitrogen may also help to produce that heart.
Next question, please.
Sitting right beside Chris Beardshaw is an orchid. I think it's outgrown its pot. Can you give me some idea of how to either split it up? I really don't want to repot it because it's too heavy as it is.
Chris, I don't know if you can see it from there. It's a monster cymbidium. Yeah, it's a bit of a giant. What do you reckon?
I think it looks great. I really do. If you felt like potting it on, then I would certainly suggest using a specialist orchid compost, because that tends to be relatively low in nutrition. It's quite a fibrous, organic matter-based compost, and it isn't going to overfeed the plant. That said, if you pot it on, by definition, you're adding extra room for the roots to move into. And as a consequence of that, the plant will then start to absorb nutrients out of that compost, and it will utilize those nutrients to primarily focus on producing foliage. Because what you have to remember is that all plants, no matter how small or insignificant or where they're from in the world, all plants have the attitude that they want to rule the world. Therefore, their primary response to a little bit more soil is to grow a bit bigger, and then a bit more soil and a bit more, and grow a bit bigger, until you get to the point where they feel slightly compromised by their position. And then they will think about flowering, because flowering produces seeds. Seeds will then allow the plant to migrate from its current restricted point into a new area and continue this I want to conquer the world scenario. So if you pot your cymbidium on, you will find that you'll get lots of fresh foliage, but you may reduce the flowering enthusiasm of it for a couple of seasons. Much better actually to try a liquid fertilizer, a specialist liquid fertilizer for a cymbidium and for orchids, and that will be balanced to the point of producing flower and not too much in the way of extra foliage.
Can I just check, Helen, I'm not sure he's getting the point here. You think it's too big. You want something smaller?
Not necessarily smaller, but really it's almost too big for a normal bungalow. And I did wonder about,
too big for a stately home,
splitting
Yeah,
it.
I'm going to go down another route. I look at that plant and think, wow, you can propagate from that and you can split it up. So no good having a small knife like this. What you need to get is probably a bread knife.
An axe.
An axe, yes, something really sharp. But, you know, you could get loads of plants from that, but I would say at least you could get good 4 plants from that.
I have a tale I could tell you it would take rather long, because it was one of the Alexander brothers. It was Tom's wife who had a problem with a similar plant. And I said, well, plastic sheet on the kitchen floor, knock it over on its side and roll it back and forward until it's loose. Out it comes, and then have you got a hatchet in the cupboard? You know, and we split it into 4, put it back into a suitable size pot. I never was asked back.
If you have no polytunnel, what vegetable is the best for growing in Scotland?
Well, this part of the world, of course, is very famous for its vegetable growing, especially root crops, because of the climate and because of the soil.
You know, you don't need a polytunnel. The polytunnel is great for maybe extending our season, because it's a very short season. Go for your peas, go for salad crops. I mean, salad crops are great because they're very quick. So, you know, if you want to sow some radish, you'll see them germinating at this time of year within about 7 days. So just experiment.
The sky's the limit. Have a go. That's the important thing.
And I would go back to what is it you enjoy eating. So for instance, if you like quite spicy foods, if you like quite oriental food, for instance, then one of the plants that I think is fabulous is to go for a beet relative, go for something like a chard.
Yeah.
And whilst you're growing your chard, get some little chilies growing on your kitchen windowsill, and then you can dice up the chilies. You can make a really good chili sauce, steam your chard so it just starts to wilt, and then you put your chili sauce over your chard and serve it with some fresh rice or an egg fried rice, that sort of thing, and it's absolutely delicious. And so start from the eating end and work backwards. Is
Beginning to sound like Mary Berry.
Have I told you the recipe for my sponge cake? Share it with you later. Yeah.
I've been growing courgettes successfully in the open for many years, except for this year. It's been a disaster. 3 of my 5 plants are already dead. The other 2 are looking as if they might be dying.
The answer lies in the soil. You know, who was it said that about 150 years ago? What soil conditions have you? Plenty organic matter?
Yes.
Plenty fertiliser? I think the death of the plants is probably due to, as you may well be, maybe the weather. That looks like a deficiency symptom. If I was taking a stab at it, it looks a bit like magnesium deficiency. So maybe you need to give them a dose of salts. But my colleagues may have another idea. It has been a difficult season. My courgettes outdoors are in a big pot, and all I could say is that they're half slow.
Well, I wondered to start off with, I wondered if it was aphids and a virus. But can I ask, Howard, I mean, are all the leaves like this, or are some of the new leaves coming in good? Well, then I would just pick off the leaves that have gone like this. And I think if the fresh leaves come in and they come in well, then they should be okay.
The manure that you put in, what is that? What are you using?
It's horse manure.
Horse manure. How well rotted is that horse manure?
It's pretty well rotted.
Describe to me how it smells.
It doesn't really smell much at all.
It doesn't smell? No. Okay, and so there's no evidence of any straw or any fragrance or any warmth in it?
It's very clean.
Very clean. And you've used it from the same source across the garden?
I've used it many years previously.
Okay, in that case I have nothing to say.
Are you... Okay, I maybe have something to ask you. Are you growing them in the same place every year?
No. No.
So you're practicing rotation. I've got nothing to say either then.
Next question. Katrina West, please.
This is spreading through our lawn, and I just wondered if you could tell me what it was and how to get rid of it.
How tall do you allow it to grow before you whack the tops off?
It gets cut by the lawnmower.
The interesting thing is, whilst I try to keep you preoccupied with answering my questions, these two are peddling like blazes under the table to get the right answer.
Yeah, we think we've got it sussed, though.
We think it's prunus, don't we?
We think it's prunus, yeah.
We've got a prunus nigra growing in the centre of the lawn, and there is some beside that as well. Yeah.
See, you never told us that. And it can be a huge problem, can't it, the prunus? Suckers.
Yeah, it can. And one of the worst types of plants to put into a lawn is a cherry. Prunus are terrible as lawn specimens. Even if you've got a bed around the base of the tree, you will find that cherry trees, as a general rule, are very shallow rooted, and they will scavenge around in the top few centimetres, which means that those roots are then getting constantly scalped or bruised by the lawnmower. And the more you cut them with the lawnmower, the more you're encouraging buds to form, because you're not taking them back down to the root. What you're doing is just carrying out a light bit of pruning on the top. Now, what's also worth pointing out is that if you've got Prunus nigra in the lawn, then the top of it is presumably, it's a dark purple colour, it's dark purple foliage. And this shows no sign of purple, which means that this is the rootstock. So what you've got here is the most vigorous, invasive, aggressive form of Prunus, and it's going to be difficult to get rid of, to be honest.
So what if we cut the tree down?
Good idea.
They'll be even more vigorous.
Yeah, they will be. Jim's right. They will be more vigorous. Yeah.
It's a despairing scenario, really, but I would be thinking it's worth your while, at least 60 centimetres or 90 centimetres out from the bole of the tree, you dig a trench, about 2 feet deep, all the way around, and chop in everything that's in there. and then starve the other ones and put some herbicide on, that's lawn herbicide, to kill these guys as they're coming up. And if you can't do that, as Mr. George Anderson might have told you if he was here, he's in Japan, isn't he?
He is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He said, well, get the directory out and go to P for Pickfords.
Final question from Donna Cameron.
Many plant names make me smile, and I wondered which plant names the panel enjoys.
Oh, gosh.
Which plant names make you smile? Chris Beardshaw, because there's no point in looking at the table and pretending you're not there.
I think it depends whether you like the plant or not, to be honest. I really do. I think, you know, there are some plants that when you hear the name, it brings a certain amount of joy because of your association with that particular plant. So, for instance, one of the things which I really enjoy, not just growing, but talking about, is Cercidophyllum japonicum. Because Cercidophyllum, it does what Latin, the plant nomenclature should do. It describes and paints the perfect picture of that particular plant. So cercis, round. Cercidophyllum, phylum is leaf, round leaf. Cercidophyllum japonicum, from Japan, the round-leafed tree from Japan. The only thing that's missing is Cercidophyllum japonicum candiflossiensis on the end, because of the way it has that delightful habit of just wafting across the arboretum late in the autumn as its foliage turns a golden colour. So I think, you know, you fall in love with plants and you get really excited about plants, and those are the names that you remember.
So what plants make you smile, Carol?
Well, I was going to maybe recite the fact that I very often go to garden centres and help people choose their plants, and I think it makes me smile sometimes, the pronunciation and the Latin.
Or pronunciation.
Yeah, and I can remember this gentleman coming up to me and he said, Carol, I've got this Leyland too. I've got this Leyland too. Yes. And I'm thinking, Leyland too? And of course he means Leylandi, because and there's two eyes on it, and he thought that was two.
Jim, the final word.
Taxonomic botanists should have been drowned when they were pups. Because they keep changing familiar Latin names to, I mean, what was that one we passed, that Brachioglottis?
Yes, which used to be Senecio.
Senecio. Senecio.
There you go, Senecio, Senecio.
The strange thing, I was taught Latin until year 3 at secondary school. Year 4, I packed it in because we had an option to pack it in. And then I became a horticulturalist and I've been using Latin ever since. At least it helps to be able to pronounce. Can I tell you a story? This is a story about the late Queen Mum. She was wont to take a wander round Balmoral, and every now and again she would stop at the head keeper's house, and she might be invited in for a bowl of soup. Now then, this is a lovely bowl of soup, she would say. Tell me, what are the ingredients? Well, the wifey would say, well, there's barley and tilt, and there's peas, and there's a bit of ham shank and tilt, and the Queen Mum said, and what is in tilt? And she says, well, there's barley and tilt, and there's peas and tilt.
And so it went round and round and round.
Yes, it did indeed.
Listen, folks, thank you very much for your questions. I hope you found the answers to be useful. Can I ask you to thank our 3 guest experts one more time, please? Jim McCall, Carol Baxter, and Chris Beardshaw.
After a lively panel discussion, we took some more informal questions.
Do you remember you helping me to grow tomatoes on top of the piggery?
I quote you regularly, dear
Well, I
boy.
quote you as well. So it's a
It
bit of
just
fun.
didn't work.
It just didn't work.
As we said, we've been invited by the Nairn and District Gardening Club, and I'm going just a few miles out of Nairn to visit a much more rural garden near Corder. Jane Mackenzie has always lived in this area, and this garden is the product of Jane and her parents' love of gardening over many years.
We live about 6.5 miles out of Nairn, about 150 metres above sea level. So the snow lies here, where in Nairn there might not be any snow at all.
It's incredible, just that few miles, how different the climate can
Yes.
be. You're very rural, so, you know, quite exposed here?
It is from the south. The south wind tends to cause more damage because we don't have any shelter.
But the herbaceous are looking good, Jane. I mean, do you lift and split that quite often?
I split the geraniums every maybe 3 to 5 years and replace it with autumn flowering plants.
Really good practice. But the other thing that struck me is your collection of aces. I mean, how many do you have?
About 20 altogether, different ages and sizes.
I presume that one with the size of the trunk must be quite an age.
Yeah, that one's about 35 years old. Mum bought it with money she got from an uncle in Canada. He wanted her to buy a box of chocolates, so she bought that instead. And
absolutely beautiful, but I think we should maybe find 1 or 2 more.
Yeah. This is one of my favourite acers. It's Acer griseum, the paper bark acer.
It's absolutely stunning, isn't it, Jane,
Yeah.
for the bark?
Yes.
But also the foliage is so healthy.
Yeah, it's one of the latest ones to come into leaf, and I leave the trees and the shrubs at the back because it's exposed from the north.
You obviously like using your secateurs as well. Tell us a wee bit about the cloud pruning.
The conifer the base was covering quite an area, so I was going to take the bottom branches off, and then I decided to give the cloud prune a go to see how I got on.
And that's the result. I mean, I love things like that.
Yes.
But what about the beech?
Yeah.
I mean, that's massive, and you obviously trim that.
Yes, about October I go round it with the electric hedge trimmer from the ground, and then I go round next stage up with the steps, and then I have an extension for the hedge trimmer, and then I climb inside, and Mum directs me
left or
there's
right?
any branches sticking out.
It's absolutely amazing. I mean, there'll come a point, will there, where you'll go, no, it's going to get too
it's
high.
Getting to that point now.
Do you have a favourite part of the garden?
I like the north side of the house.
Let's have a look at that then. Well, Jane, I can see why you love this area. I mean, this is packed full of choice plants.
Yeah, I enjoy collecting hostas and acers.
And what about this, the Montana?
Yeah, that's Clematis Marjorie.
I mean, she's a real showstopper at the moment, isn't she?
It is. It's lovely at this time of year.
And to me, I feel like this is a full-time job for you, looking after this garden.
Yeah.
But you are a professional gardener.
A full-time gardener, yes.
And you obviously love it.
I do, yes. I love gardening.
And for me, this has been a real joy to look round your garden. Thank you very much.
That's okay. Thank you for coming.
Well, that's our lovely trip to Nairn finished. We started on the beach in the rain, and we're back on the beach in the rain.
Starting to
But
rain,
in between
Jim.
times, it's been fantastic.
We've had a lovely time, haven't we? Seen some beautiful gardens.
Yeah, yeah. And some cracking questions at the question session.
Absolutely, and I was fascinated about those carrots.
Beech Grove is back in 2 weeks' time. Carl and I will actually be at the Aberdeen Royal Infirmary helping with a garden in the children's section. It's fabulous, it really is. That means that Mr. B will be in Beech Grove on his own. Now, he could get up to a bit of mischief.
That could be interesting.
Time alone will tell. Till we see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.